Hello. A little bit dark in here today. I was trying to get these videos done before the sun went down, but the last video that I did decided not to make it. It crashed. So, here we go. This is going to be a cross video, or cross series video for both Spiritsense and Path of the Empath. Because what I want to talk about is a few, my experiences in discerning the difference between, like, your own ego and inner being, and other people, and your emotions, and other people's ego, emotions, thoughts, things like that. And I just did a video, it's almost 20 minutes, but I feel like it's worth watching, about the difference between, like, your inner monologue driven by your ego and your inner being and, like, spirit or other beings communicating with you. So this will piggyback off of that. If you want more information about that, go ahead and head there. Now, just to keep a pithy reminder on it, your own thoughts and your own emotions, whether it's your inner monologue, ego, or it's your inner being, are primarily going to be explainable. You know what I mean? Like, if you got up and you stubbed your toe, it makes sense why you might swear and yell and do that stuff. You know, like, that makes sense. It's logical. Likewise, if you got up in the morning and you meditated while you had some tea or coffee, or you went on a pleasant drive before you went to work, it's explainable. It makes sense why you might feel peaceful and calm, right? Now, there are plenty of times, and this is an important thing to learn, especially if you are an empath, because we all affect each other. Look up mirror neurons, right? We all affect and influence each other. We are all affected by each other's energy and thoughts, which are energy, and emotions, which are energy. Like, we're all affected by each other and influenced. But as an empath, you are much more impacted by them until you learn to become conscious of it, and you learn how to protect yourself some and filter some things, stuff like that. Now, as I said, your own feelings and your own thoughts, whether ego or inner being, are typically explainable. Whether they're a habit of yours, or something happened that you initiated or did, or something that you got into, it makes sense. Now, where it starts to become more noticeable to discern from is when, let's say, you're in a happy-go-lucky mood, and you go home and suddenly you feel really grumpy, or you feel rushed, or you feel distressed for some reason, and you feel depressed or something, like something feels off. And the biggest indicator of discernment is that you can't place why. Let's say everybody in the house is doing their own thing, and it doesn't make sense why you feel the way you feel, or why you have these weird intrusive thoughts going on. Or say this happens at work. Say you go in and, like, even if you work by yourself or in a small cubicle or something, and you work around others and everybody seems kind and polite and have all their needs met, and yet, whereas you were happy-go-lucky, you feel stressed out. You can't quite place why. Now, the typical thing, the light went out. The typical thing, especially before we hit our awakening, and really embrace it, is that we will look for a reason to explain it. I mean, we look for it, but, like, we'll pick something, like, oh, the cat splashed some kitty litter on the floor again. That must be why I'm stressed out, you know? Or, oh, I didn't get these things done today. That must be why I'm stressed out. Or, oh, I did have that weird conversation with so-and-so earlier. That must be why I'm stressed out. But really, like, we're trying to make sense of what does not make sense. Because if it's not your typical MO, or, like, if you saw the cat made a mess and it didn't really bother you when it made a mess, it doesn't make sense why it would bother you now. Likewise, if you had conversation with somebody, and it seemed to go fairly well, or it really didn't bother you, then it doesn't make sense why it would suddenly bother you now. Instead, what actually makes more sense is that somebody else within your radius, I'm going to say. It affects you more the closer you are to somebody. This is why it's so very important to be careful about who you share intimacy with, or physical energy, or who you talk with on a regular basis, or who you work with on a regular basis, because the closer you are to somebody, the more you influence each other on it. And as an empath, especially an untrained empath or an unaware empath, you are much more affected by it. But you can notice this, though, because if you start to discern, if you were in a happy-go-lucky mood and you went to a certain environment, or you drove somewhere, or whatever it is, and you suddenly feel different than the way that you felt. Like, maybe it's not angry and stressed, maybe you feel depressed, or maybe you feel sick, or maybe you keep having this thought about, I gotta go to the store, I gotta go to the store, but you can't think of anything you need to go to the store for, right? Or maybe, you keep, you get like suspicious thoughts or something, and you're like thinking, I gotta look out the window, or did I lock the door, or did I set my alarm clock? Maybe I should double check it. Did I do the dishes? Did I turn the teapot off? Like if you're typically a person who does those things, and doesn't worry about those things, you're probably not developing paranoia. You know what I mean? You're probably not like suddenly not doing those things. Check around you. Maybe you have a new neighbor, or if you have new roommates, or new partners, or new coworkers, or you're at a new job, you know, investigate a little bit. You can usually tell, like, if you have a funny feeling about something not being right, that's your intuition saying, this feeling within me is not mine. It's like when you get sick and your body's T cells come in and they go, up, intruder, get it out, right? Your intuition acts kind of as that motion in there that's like, this isn't mine. And it might be someone around you is hiding something from you, or lying to you, or that they have a surprise for you, even. Like, there's different reasons, but you're only going to know when you start talking to people, and you can, just pay attention. Like, don't assume anything, don't judge anything, just start investigating. Worst case, maybe you are developing some weird new habit of forgetting to turn the teapot off, but more than likely, you're going to notice that somebody around you is having feelings like that. Or if you keep getting thoughts in your mind that either they're not your MO, they're not your typical thought patterns, or you only have certain thought patterns around certain people, or you've been working really hard on overcoming old, like, say, fear-based thoughts, or thinking the worst, or things like that, and yet when you're around certain people, you're right back at it, even if you just spent time meditating, or doing mindfulness practices and things. It's like, why do I keep going back to this? I know I'm doing my work, right? Investigate, look around you. I had a good friend that we often had a similar wise proverb. Mine was, "You are who you hang out with," and theirs was, show me who you hang out with, I'll show you who you are." And that's a very good way to discern it, and especially, in fact, you might have other people who tell you, you can get feedback from other people, like, gosh, you're so different when you're around so-and-so, or when you're different when you're at work versus at a party, or versus at school, or when you're with your family, or when you're by yourself. You seem very different, or you're different with me than you are with others. If you're getting that sort of feedback, you are likely an empath, and need to put a little more conscious effort into developing and honing such a blessing. And yes, I'm aware that at times it can seem like a curse, but that's usually before we've awakened. Sorry, I'm noticing the blurriness from the darkness on this video. And if you're getting that sort of feedback, or you're just noticing, because our awakenings into these abilities can happen at different times and ages, and so if you're noticing how different you're acting around certain people, and maybe like really out of character, probably an empath. And think about, just observe yourself. This is what introspection is about. This is self-healing and self-growth. Like, think about who you're hanging out with most often. who you're sharing the most intimate parts of yourself with. And like, even if on the outside they seem like a really calm, wonderful person, you know, or your like, say your coworker always gives you the impression that they're feeling good and happy, but whenever you're around them you feel yucky and icky or passive aggressive. Like, that's was it science is, you test something and you get the same results every time, right? Or most every time. Use the scientific method in this one. If you hang out with a sibling, and whenever you hang out with that sibling you come back feeling like you want to pick a fight with somebody, you know it's probably because you're being influenced around them. It doesn't mean stop hanging out with them, but practice some empathic shields and some mindfulness practices, and really just observe yourself when you're around them and you don't leave with their energy. You're not quite as influenced by it. And it's not just, like, influence from thoughts and feelings aren't negative. This is part of, you are who you hang out with. And because who you're called to hang out with can say a lot about where your vibration is, and what sort of karma you're learning, and how to level up. Because, like, there's probably some people in your life who you feel really safe with, and like whenever you're around them you feel like you want to play or try something new, or you want to banter and have jokes, or do things that, like, they're not based in fear, and they're comfortable, or you want to talk about accomplishments you're proud of, or you just feel calm and warm, or maybe you feel more philosophical, then, that person, and you could probably tell, they'd probably tell you already, but that person is likely either naturally more in alignment with their inner being, or they are consciously in alignment with their inner being. And so they are the highest vibration in the room, most likely. And the more you're called to hang out and be with people like that, the more likely it is that you are getting into alignment with that, And if you're called to hang out with people who are more enlightened and more aware, you're probably getting there too. Whereas, if you're being called, if you find yourself more around people who are like in victim mode, or have a lot of problems that follow them, it's likely that either you're falling into old patterns, or you've not yet healed enough to come out of those patterns of your own. And, the universe is saying, hey, work on this. This is what you need to work on. I have a couple of friends even that, like, there's some that when I'm in a really low vibration, I'm angry or frustrated, they're available. And when I'm in a high vibration, they're not available. And I have other friends, and that, like, when I'm in a really good vibration, doesn't necessarily mean happy, but when I'm in a high vibration alignment with my inner being, they're available. And when I'm not, they're not. Right? And people in the middle, more neutral people, right? But can also tell you, that's another way to experiment with some of that, but I'll do a different video on that one. Is like, if you can't reach somebody, they're not available, maybe think about what the thoughts that you're thinking. How are you thinking about them? How are you thinking about yourself? Maybe try to dip down to a low vibration for a little bit. Are they more accessible? Okay, that might be why you're not rendezvousing with them when you are thinking about what satisfies you and makes you feel good. And the opposite, if you're not able to reach out, if somebody's not reaching out or they're not getting back to you, maybe you're in a lower vibration. Start thinking about what brings you joy and abundance, and write out lists of gratitude. And then, they'll likely reach out, but otherwise you can reach out, and it'll be more likely that you'll actually connect. But, I mean, to stick with the point in this video before it gets too long, is when you're around any type of person, whether they're in alignment with their higher selves, or they're more in alignment with their egos, or they're more neutral. As I said in the beginning of the video, your thoughts and your feelings, and your ego and inner being are typically more explainable. Like, say, with your ego, you typically worry about money. Okay? Now, when you're around certain people, you start worrying more about toilet paper, it's probably not your thought. It's probably somebody else around you. Or, with feelings, like, if you are typically in kind of a neutral space and you go around certain people and you feel joyful, And whenever you're around them, you feel joyful. That's probably how they're feeling. And being able to discern the difference helps you choose which way you want to feel. And, in each moment, you choose who you are and who you want to be. Do you want to hang around with people that are worrying about more things than you're worrying about? Or do you want to be around people that feel joyful when you are either anxious or neutral? And how fun is it to feel joyful, right? Or grateful, right? And I would say, in my experience, most people either are not telepathic or are not aware enough to be able to utilize the ability, unless you have a specific, like, soul-like connection for one reason or another. But being empathic, being an empath is clairsentient, so it's typically more about emotions. But as you become more conscious of it, or if you're having challenges in interpreting emotions, just like if you lost your scent or your taste or your sight, other ones pick up. Sometimes the telepathy can be heightened. Or if you're at a distance from somebody that you were otherwise connected to emotion-wise, that can be heightened. And again, whether you're, directly next to somebody, or they're 50 feet away, or they're a city away, or states away, again, your thoughts and your feelings are typically going to be explainable. Either they're explainable by your patterns and habits, or they're explainable by something you are consciously choosing to think about. Whereas thoughts from other people, one, you're probably going to hear it more in their voice. Like if somebody criticizes you a lot, you're probably, either when you're around them or when you're, say, talking with them through text or something, you're going to hear their voice in your mind. Or on the opposite, if there's somebody that often tells you good things or asks you weird questions, or reminds you to do self-care, or they usually have some funny joke, you're going to hear things that, either in your voice or in their voice, you're going to hear things that are of them. And usually they will come in either randomly, or they'll come in regularly, but it's still pretty apparent that, if we're around somebody long enough, we already get influenced by what they tell us on a regular basis. If they're telling us shitty things, we're going to feel shitty. If they're telling us nice things, good things, kind things, we're going to feel those ways. And those are that's their voice that we're going to hear. But there is a difference, and it just takes time and experience to discern it, that between when, in an empathic way, you are receiving their thoughts and their influences, versus when it's just a thought pattern. Like, if if you go day to day and you're constantly reminded of things your mother or father told you growing up, that's probably you. That's probably either trauma response, or if it's a positive thing, it's a nostalgia thing. But if you're getting thoughts in from your brother who you just hung out with a few days ago but you don't see very often, that's probably influence from them. That's probably thoughts coming in from them. And often, when we're thinking of somebody, they're thinking of us also. Not always, but often. And so if you're thinking of somebody, think about what your thoughts are when you're thinking about them. They're probably in a similar alignment to you. You can play with that too and change how you think about them and see what happens. How they react around you, or you react around them. And as an empath, it's important to learn to play with these things so you can learn the discernment of them and learn to filter out what the difference is between your thoughts and your feelings and your ego and your inner being and other people's egos. Like, if you're afraid of bees and suddenly you have a fear of worms and you never had a fear of worms, it's probably not your fear of worms. You're probably taking on what somebody else's fear is. Now, I'll do some videos later on that can help do some visualization exercises about being able to help separate some of that stuff from that point. But the first thing is introspection and observation, which is more what this video is about. Now, I'm coming up to the 20-minute mark, and usually my videos don't like to survive past that. So if there's any further information that anyone would like, or if this has been a whole bunch of gibberish, please feel free to comment below and let me know. In any case, I hope that everybody has a wonderful rest of the evening full of plenty of gratitude, and I will see you next time.